Hey everybody, I'm Phillip Heilman here with John Reid, the Florida Times-Union. Going to be talking a little bit of Jaguars entering their divisional round game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. John, we haven't really had you on any at all this season.
I'm glad to be on, though.
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know you, maybe just talk kind of maybe a little bit about your path to Jacksonville.
Well, it's been a long time. I started in New Orleans, covered the NBA for 13 years, and kind of liked that beat, but wanted to get closer to home, and actually got home to Jacksonville. So it's been a wonderful experience. And who would have ever thought that we'd be covering a playoff team when they went 3-13?
I was going to say, you definitely arrived at a good time, because I don't know if it had been any of the previous 4 or 5 years, maybe it wouldn't have been as fun of a fit for you. But yeah, it's second round of the playoffs, only 4 teams left in the AFC. You got New England, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, and Jacksonville. We got 5 questions for today, but just kind of throughout the course of the season, how do you think the Jags ended up here?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think the way that they approach the off season, and it filtered in through the training camp of just having this, we're going to not change the way we want to do things. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be a physical football team. They wanted to rely on the run.
Oh, there we go. All right, looks like we're back. So, yeah, you were saying they had the plan in April.
Yeah, they had the plan in April, executed the plan. You go out and get Leonard Fournette, a physical back. You really had some questions, in my opinion. You had questions on the offensive line. And you didn't waver the plan, even though those questions, we looked at a football team that wasn't physically, they didn't show a lot of physical play up front in the preseason. And that could have been easily a situation that maybe we need to be more of a finesse and pass and get, they didn't do that. They stuck with what they believed that would work. And you got to give Tom Coughlin, I think you got to give him credit, but you definitely got to give Doug Marrone credit for sticking to this plan and being that physical team. And we knew coming in, I didn't think that this football team had a bad defense even last year.
Right.
I think they had to put some right pieces, put the veteran pieces in place. And I think that when you look at the way this team has played defense, I mean, that's an elite level defense. And
certainly.
And that definitely has been a difference, I think, the way they've played all season and consistently on that defensive side.
Yeah, and I think it really easily could have unraveled at several points in the preseason. You had Brandon Albert and that whole fiasco. Yeah. That seems like 10 years ago now, but I mean, that guy was slotted in to be their starting left tackle, and he wavers, says, I'm retiring, I'm not retiring, I'm retiring, I'm not retiring. And all of a sudden you have a rookie in Cam Robinson who's your starting left tackle in week 1. And like you said, for a team that wanted to run the ball, they wanted that to be their offensive identity, and the left tackle is, the cornerstone of an offensive line. I thought they did a good job of navigating that. And then also, you lose Allen Robinson the first series of the season, He has 1 catch for 17 yards the entire season. That was the guy who's going to be your number 1 receiver who, when you did throw the ball, the passing game was going to flow through. This is a guy's coming off a little bit of a subpar season, but only 2 years ago he had 14 touchdowns and 1,400 yards. And, kind of looking at the way this offense ended up being constructed, I think he would have been a 90-catch guy for them.
Oh, no question. And the fact that you looked at what his performance was throughout training camp, you knew he was going to have a big season in July. And just the way he caught almost everything. I mean, acrobatic catches, over 2 defenders, over the middle. He did everything to indicate that he was going to, like you say, probably 90 catch, all pro, you name it. I think he was in line to do that. He was by far, in my opinion, he was the best guy throughout training camp and giving consistent effort every day.
Yeah, which really says a lot, because you did have a cornerback in Jalen Ramsey who is a first-team All-Pro, and a second cornerback in A.J. Boye who's a second-team All-Pro. And going into the year, you didn't really know. I mean, you knew that Ramsey was good. You knew that Boye had a nice career in Houston, but you didn't know that they were going to be that caliber of cornerback. So the fact that Robinson was playing that well against them shows me that, he would have been in for a really good season. But let's go ahead and just jump into the 5 top storylines going right now. What are we, 6 days ahead, or 6 days away from the Pittsburgh game? I think the first one definitely has to be Blake Bortles. So he has the 3-game stretch late in the season, 7 touchdowns, no picks, 301 yards per game. Now the last 3, the San Francisco, Tennessee, Buffalo, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, only 209 yards per game. only 87 yesterday. He actually had more rushing yards than passing yards in a playoff game. I think he was only the second quarterback to ever do that, joining Michael Vick. He's obviously not Michael Vick. He's not that type of player.
No.
So is Bortles more QB1? Is he more the second quarterback in terms of those stats that I read, or is he somewhere in the middle? What do you kind of see from him on Sunday and kind of moving forward?
Well, I think the problem with Blake has been he's been pressing. He's gone back to press like he was early in the season.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's been part of the offensive game plan also. I think you can't always get him in that right mode by doing all these safe routes and intermediate passing. I think there were some times in that game Sunday where they probably should have chunked it a little more downfield.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when he's given opportunity to actually do the things expected of him, he can come through and do that. I think sometimes Blake is a guy that you obviously never know what you're going to get from game to game.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
we got to be honest with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when he is in a situation where he's getting off passes and getting into a rhythm, I think you have to allow him to get into a rhythm. I think there's been a little bit conservative because you look, he had 5 interceptions in the final 2 weeks of the regular season, and I think I just thought the offense was a little conservative, and he didn't play well. He didn't throw the ball with no zip, no accuracy. I thought even the intermediate routes he was underthrowing receivers. But I think going into Pittsburgh, I think the pressure is not solely on him. I don't think it's been solely on him for the whole year, which is probably was the problem he had all last season.
Right.
But I think that you got to get him, even if you script plays. I think you may script the first 15 plays, and out of that 15 plays, give him six throws that he can complete, and then let's see after 15 plays where you need to go with your offensive play calling. And I think you still got to allow him to get into some type of a rhythm, but I don't think you have to be so safeguarded that you don't trust him to throw the ball downfield. You don't throw him he can't make tough throws. He can make tough throws, but I think you got to allow him to establish a rhythm. And then if he doesn't have that rhythm by the third quarter, then you go with the run game or you go with the crossing routes. But you can't have everyone, including running backs, running 5-10 yard routes on safe routes just so we hope that he won't force a turnover. So
Right.
Can't coach like that.
Yeah, you mentioned the weather. I thought something that Doug Marrone said today was pretty interesting, that especially when they were going in one direction, the wind was swirling so much that it really limited what they wanted to do. And he said it was the first time that he's encountered it since he's been in Jacksonville. So there definitely was something to that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I thought, it was kind of interesting going back and watching the game this morning. They did have him make a couple of safe throws early on to kind of get him going, and they barely missed one. The slant to Leonard Fournette, where Fournette dropped the pass.
Right.
The Bills were in single high safety. If he makes that catch and can get a block from Mercedes Lewis or just make the safety miss, I mean, that could easily be a 40, 50, 60-yard game if it's not a touchdown. And then the whole game has changed. So, maybe that's a play that they really thought that they had something there.
But I'll tell you what, Phillip, these guys, I mean, you got to go. I looked at this team. You relied on rookie receivers. D.D. Westbrook played great. Keelan Cole played great. But when you got Allen Hurns, and I know Marquise kind of came back for the first game after missing 2 games with the ankle, but you can't go in these games and you target them both like one target each.
One target each, yeah.
You got to find a way to allow those guys to make plays, and I didn't think they were targeted enough. And I think you definitely they can't go in these games, particularly in Pittsburgh, and come away with no catches.
Right. No, you're not going to win
Not your
that way.
veteran
Definitely
receivers.
not. No. As far as Keelan Cole goes, he has, I think for an undrafted rookie, a very solid season.
Oh, yeah.
The Houston game, 186 yards and a touchdown. And then things didn't really go right in San Francisco.
No.
Very clearly, Keelan was not on the same page several times with Blake. A couple of times resulting in interceptions. The Tennessee game, he fumbles.
Yeah.
And then yesterday, only 1 target. Do you think this is a little bit of the moment is too big for him? The coaches maybe weren't trusting him? Or is it just kind of one of those things where you've got to give him some deep balls still?
I think you still got to get him some deep balls, and you got to understand he's not a rookie at this point.
Right, yeah.
But you got to go with what got you to this point. And there were some big games, but particularly in December, where you had to count on him to make that catch.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think they went to him enough. And yes, he had the strip away against Tennessee, but and I thought in the San Francisco game that he kind of was the cause of the interception. I thought that he didn't run his route all the way through, and he didn't want to get hit. He saw the guy coming at him.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's just part of being a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think keep with what you're doing. I think this kid has tremendous talent, and if you got to find routes to get him, I mean, he can get separation from anyone.
Yeah, he's a good route runner.
And I think you have to go with that. I mean, if he can do it, then go with him. But don't base it on, he had the ball stripped away against Tennessee. He didn't really. He definitely caused Blake Bortles that interception in San Francisco.
Right.
And you just go with what you got, but you got to go. You can't have that many receivers without catches.
I've never seen it. D.D. Westbrook was the only receiver who had a catch yesterday for the Jaguars. He had 5 catches for 48 yards. Aside from that, it was Mercedes Lewis, Leonard Fournette, and obviously Ben Quack on the touchdown. And I've, obviously not been, working in the industry as long as you have, but I cannot remember a game where a team has won a playoff game with only one receiver having a catch. I mean, it's...
And I can't recall it, and I also didn't, whether or not they got separation or not. I mean, sometimes you can throw the high ball over the top and let those guys go up and get it, but you got to at least make that attempt
or something, give them some plays.
So they can make some plays. And I didn't think they had that ability. They didn't get the ability to make those type of plays against Buffalo.
All right, moving on to question number 2. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, the running game, Leonard Fournette. This is a guy who was the 4th overall pick. I think going into last week, people were saying this is why you drafted Leonard Fournette, for games like this where, maybe it's windy, maybe it's cold. It's a team that you should beat. Put it in his hands, run 20, 25, 30 times, whatever it takes. Well, he ended up with 57 rushing yards on 2.7 yards per carry, and the Jaguars had to run a play action in a goal line situation because Leonard was stopped twice. Is it the offensive line, not creating holes? Is it Leonard maybe wearing down a little bit after a long season? A combination of both. What do you kind of chalk up? 2.7 yards per carry, 3.6 the game before, and 2.7 the one before that. So not a lot of big runs for Leonard of late.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think it's a combination of the offensive line need to block a little better.
Yeah.
And also, Leonard has this. I thought there was a couple of times in the game against Buffalo where the whole and his job is to get. I mean, what you said, 2.7 per carry.
2.7 yards per carry on Sunday against Buffalo. I think it was 21 for 57, something like that.
I don't think that's enough.
No, I don't think that's enough either. Yeah,
but I just think you obviously continue to go with him, but I think that he has to have that vision a little better, and then I think maybe run him some different things. I mean, the thing is about Leonard and their running game. He's always facing a loaded box.
Right, yep.
And you got to come up with some things offensively to just unset that defense a little bit. Whether it's a draw, I don't see many draw plays involving him. I don't see a lot of pitch outs. Those are the things that he's got to get some space. Even if you got to create space for him, you got to do those things to get him in the open field. You know? Another thing I like that they did was hitting him on the screen passes and let him create, some separation on just, get the little 5-10 yard screen pass and then let him go downhill and get yardage that way. But you have to find different things. I thought the offensive everything, the play calling was way too conservative, but get him more involved and just not just going up the middle and he's got 4 guys hitting him each time he go up the middle. Just open up the offense a little bit more. Take advantage of what he's been bringing you, but utilize what he can bring in different ways and then go back to the inside running once things open up a little better.
Yeah, you mentioned the sort of pitch outs. I think one time yesterday they did fake kind of like a jet sweep to Westbrook, and then they pitched it to Fournette toward the left. I think he ran for 16 yards. I think it was the longest gain of the day, and he finally had a little bit of space. And that just kind of shows you, when this guy doesn't have, 4 or 5 guys immediately staring him down when he's taking carries, he still does have, I think, pretty good burst on a lot. He had a couple of runs yesterday where I thought he could have been stopped for 2 yards or 3 yards, and he pushed it to 5 or 6. So he still, I think, has the talent and definitely the drive. I don't think he's he's battling the ankle injury and he's had a quad injury, but I think he's still at a place where he can can perform. But yeah, I think definitely a little bit more creative play calling, and that one play certainly showed it.
Yeah, and then on initial contact, maybe I think that it's one thing to get yardage after the contact, but it's hard for anybody.
Right, yeah.
To get that contact and then try to get yardage after 4 guys are already on you, and it still comes down to the offensive line, especially in the interior, got to clear the holes a little bit better. There's too much penetration coming through the line of scrimmage when he gets the getting handoffs, and that's Earl Campbell would have problems with that. So.
and Doug Marrone even sort of mentioned that today. He, I guess, was kind of just asked generally about Leonard's performance and went toward the offensive line. He said if they're not doing their job up front, it's going to be very difficult. If they're doing a good job up front, I think we'll all do a better job, and we have to figure it out in a quick fashion. So I think they're definitely, especially Doug Marrone, a guy who was the offensive line coach here before he was promoted when it went in-house. That's a guy who has a keen eye on the offensive line, and I think he definitely recognizes that, maybe there are some plays where Leonard could bounce it out and could have made a few more good runs, but definitely the offensive line's performance has to step up against a Pittsburgh defensive line that's pretty good with Cam Hayward and old friend Tyson Alualu and a few other guys.
Very physical defensive front.
Definitely. A little bit of news for topic number 3. Pittsburgh receiver Antonio Brown returned to practice Monday. We saw him in Week 5 against the Jaguars. Did you think that how they handled him, how they kind of covered him, is what they should do again Sunday, or how would you handle it?
Well, he's just a talented guy. When Jalen Ramsey, I respect Jalen Ramsey enough that when he says a guy is pretty good coming from him, when he's a receiver,
right,
then he's pretty good. And I recall back to that game in Week 5. I think it was the first play of the game that Ben went straight down the field with Antonio Brown. I think it was like about might have been like 50-some yards. They got down to about the 20 and couldn't score from there.
Right, that sounds
straight
right.
off the bat. It was just a deep ball, and Jalen was on him. But this guy, he makes catches. He knows how to create space. He's a guy that I don't think you can really shut down.
Yeah.
I think when you get in the red zone, you can utilize and maybe even put a safety with him, with the cornerback. I think he's good enough that you might put two people on him. He's that dangerous. But I think you rely on Jalen Ramsey to cover him like he did in Week 5. To me, that matchup was okay. Jalen got some wins. Antonio Brown got some wins, and that kind of equalized things out. And obviously, we know that the Jaguars came out on top in that. But I think that's one of the big matchups and one of the things that's make this game exciting, because I think those two guys are definitely at the top of the game, and I don't think for a second that Ben is going to look for Antonio Brown, regardless that the Jaguars got 2 All-Pro cornerbacks. That makes no difference.
Right. No, I agree, and I think you made a good point in that Jalen won some and Antonio won some. In that, in a lot of games, opposing quarterbacks aren't winning almost any against Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
And when you look at the stats, Antonio Brown in that game had 10 catches for 157 yards. So you say, okay, well, that would seem to indicate that he pretty much had whatever he wanted. Well, it came on 19 targets.
Oh, yeah.
So that's about 8.3 yards per attempt. And my guess would be, if you go back and look at each game with Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown, that was probably one of the fewest yards per target that Antonio Brown had.
Yeah.
So if you can almost just play him to a net draw, I think that really swings the game for the Jaguars, because Antonio Brown is going to be, if Jalen Ramsey is 1A, then Antonio Brown is 1B in terms of best player in this game.
Oh, yeah.
And he's so important to the Steelers' offense that if Jalen can kind of play him to a draw, then you can devote so many more resources to stopping Le'Veon Bell, which is what I think the Jaguars got to do in the first game. Bell ran 15 times for only 47 yards, so not a lot of long runs, not a lot of big plays from him. And you kind of mentioned it. They got to the red zone, I think, several times in that game and came away with field goals, and that was the difference, Pittsburgh kicked 3 field goals, and toward the end, Roethlisberger started throwing interceptions, 2 interceptions that were returned for touchdowns by the Jaguars, and a lot of that I think went back to Jalen playing Antonio to a draw.
One thing I like about the matchup with the Jaguars against the Steelers is the speed at the linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
They could cover ground quick, and I remember Miles Jack and Talvin Smith. They were on coverage.
Yep.
I mean, they didn't allow much space for LeBron to go. And they were on him as soon as if he went outside, they were there, and they got to count on that type of athleticism that they showed, and just the being in the right spots to make plays. I thought they did that the entire game against Pittsburgh, and they got to do that. And who knows, Pittsburgh might try to come out and pass more underneath routes with the tight ends and try to get some space and then open it up downfield with Antonio Brown. I don't think they're going to come out with the same attack that they had in October,
Yeah, probably not. But I think that's a good point, because so much of Le'Veon Bell's value is that he is a good receiver. I mean, the guy had 10 catch games and 8 catch games, 6 catch games. Every game they're trying to, he's a safety blanket for Roethlisberger on so many plays, and they also design plays where he is a receiver, where the sole aspect is to get Le'Veon Bell the ball in passing situations, and having guys like Miles Jack, like Talvin Smith. I think that's crucial, because there's not very many teams in the league who have 2 linebackers of that caliber of athleticism.
Mm-hmm. That can get side to side.
Exactly.
And can get, and if you put them in blitz packages, they can get at the quarterback too. They don't where he's been.
Yeah.
I just think the guy is
Talbot's really good.
Very consistent. I mean, it's a position that you have to read, and you have to be in the spot to make plays. And he don't make many mistakes. If you look at those games, he's always around the ball. He's even in coverage. I mean, I remember that game, the interception that he had. He took it to the house. But always seems to be in the right areas. Always not out of place, and he's there. To me, I think he leads these guys each game almost, seems like, in tackles. So he's definitely got to be in the right spots.
He always seems to be around the ball.
Linebacker, so.
For sure, definitely. Moving on, topic number 4, a guy who you'll be tackling later this week in the Times-Union. Also, just a little shout out. You can always read everybody's work in the Florida Times-Union and on Jacksonville.com each day. Really important, obviously, to support local journalism, something that we're very passionate about, and we expend a lot of resources trying to cover the team the best way possible. So a guy that you talked to, I think today, Marcel Darius, obviously he was the center of attention last week going against the Bills. I think he called it ironic as hell that he was going to be facing the Bills after being traded from there early in the season. 1, how did you think he played in the game? He started. And 2, kind of what did he have to say today coming out of that performance?
Well, I go back to Sunday. It's a load to block him.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
Yes, sir. And the one thing about him is, even if he doesn't make the tackles or make the play, he's whatever gap there, he's clogging it up. So they either going away from him or they going at him.
Right.
And I just like to me, and he wanted to come in and basically put, I'm talking to a guy that's an established veteran. He's been an all-pro, and he's worried about how the guys accept him.
Yeah.
But that just says what his passion is, that he wants to do well, and I think he's done a great job in really enhancing their run-stopping capabilities, and I think he's definitely going to be a key in this game. I mean, they didn't have him the last time.
That's a good point.
But I think that he's been tremendous, because he's a big guy, he's a strong guy, and sometimes it takes 2 offensive linemen to get him out. Or try whatever, shield him or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of double teams.
And he also seems like he's a guy that could get to the quarterback, because he's applying penetration inside too. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that the Jaguars went after him. 1, because they were last in the league in run defense at that time, but also he's a guy who, like you said, can shed blocks and get after the quarterback. Let me see if you have the kind of same read on. I thought it was kind of interesting as well. When he comes from Buffalo, you kind of hear about a little bit of a checkered past, whether it came to drug test or fit in the locker room. When I talked to him, seems like a great guy.
Oh, yeah. He seems like a humble guy.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of guys, Man, I spoke to a lot of athletes in my journalism career. And, always the I call it like a honeymoon. The guy get traded, he comes to the new team. And about the first 2 weeks, he's a great guy. He don't mind talking, sharing. And then it gets about a month in, you can start seeing the real true signs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this guy definitely is a guy. I think he likes being here.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I think he's a guy who understands what the talent is on this roster. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's something that he sees more playoff, bursts in there. Another thing I can say about him is I think he's actually made Malik Jackson and other guys on that defensive front better.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he came in, those guys, man, we bringing in a guy. And I know Malik has said, man, that contract he got is a tremendous contract.
Right,
and you
exactly.
bringing in a guy that playing your position, I think that's the coach doesn't need to say anything. That's an internal motivation,
mm-hmm.
and I think that's what he brought to that defensive front. That you guys better start tackling a little better on run plays, or we got somebody in here that's going to replace you.
Right.
And I think they still feel that.
Yeah, and I definitely don't think there's any coincidence that Malik Jackson, I think the last 2 months has played really well.
Yeah.
He saw Buffalo's opening possession yesterday ended with a Malik Jackson sack where essentially he was lined up between the center and right guard and just shot right between the center and left guard. I thought he was dealing with a little bit of lower body injury early in the year, and I don't know if he could have probably had that explosion early on. But yeah, you saw a guy, I think he was there in less than 3 seconds. Tyrod Taylor was on the ground and Malik Jackson was right there. And I definitely think, like you said, Malik has, I think, talked at length at times that the Darius addition has challenged him. And sometimes, you say these guys, well, they're getting, $80, $90 million contracts. Why do they need to be challenged? But I definitely think there's still some human element. Even when you're going 100%, when they bring somebody else in, you find a little bit extra to make plays.
That's the one thing that I feel is different about this team. I've covered some other teams and things, but I feel this team is a self-motivated type of thing. Some teams probably need coach to come in and give this speech, make threats and all that. Yeah. I think this team in the locker room, it just feels like it's a group that seems like they want to do good for each other. And I know that might sound kind of, oh, really? But I think I remember one time back in October, the guys from all those secondary guys, the Jalen Ramsey's, A.J. Bouye, and all those guys say they go out to like they have these lunch sessions or whatever, dinner sessions, and they talk about things and different things like that. And I just felt that, I think that around that locker room, I think, number one, the guys like each other. There's a lot of teams where guys don't like each other.
Right, yeah, definitely. And I think that locker room has had guys who didn't like each other in the past, in the recent past.
And I think that helps to why they're winning. And I think they're self-motivated, and I also think they push each other. They want each other to succeed. Mm-hmm. And you don't find that in every NFL locker room. Man.
No, definitely not. And another guy who I think has been a big part of that is Calais Campbell. Yeah, obviously, the Jaguars went out and got him. I thought pretty much made him their top priority in free agency, and in addition to the franchise record, 14.5 sacks. When you just deal with the guy every day, whether he's talking to Jackson or Darius, or whether he's you see videos of him leading the team and talking to the team before and after games and stuff. He just has brought such a level of professionalism that I think was really missing last year. They had good talent last year. They had good players. The defense, I think, was like, 6th in total yardage and stuff like that, and the offense had some trouble. But you just never really got the sense that there was a ton of professionalism in the locker room. It was a lot of guys who didn't really know how to lead, still kind of needed to be led. And I think there's still a little bit of that. Ramsey's still a young guy. Fournette's a young guy. Cam Robinson's a young guy. Blake's a young guy. There's a lot of young guys at important positions. And when you bring in a guy like Calais Campbell, and you bring in like a guy like even Barry Church, I think both of those guys have been really instrumental in the locker room this year.
I'll tell you what, the first thing I noticed about him in training camp, every drill, he's always first. You got to lead by showing it. You can't be a leader by talking it. You show the leadership, and it also helps when you come from a winning franchise.
Sure,
even though Arizona didn't no Super Bowl champions and that kind of thing.
But they were there once.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, they got there once.
And they've had a winning type of team, philosophy, and they've won big games.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes in, and it's just like he's bringing this, and I've also seen him not just talk to defensive guys. I've seen him actually talk to some running backs.
Yeah.
And I think everybody in that locker room respects him, and obviously he's the tallest guy in the room.
Right. Yeah.
But
When you're 6'8", everybody respects. It's a little bit easier to earn some respect when you're 6'8", 300 plus pounds. But definitely, I think his personality lends itself to that. One more we can get wrapped up. This is a little bit shorter one. The weather on Sunday. The Jaguars had pretty nice weather yesterday, but going into Pittsburgh, the low could be 8 degrees. It could also, be another swirly wind, gusts up to 20, 25 miles an hour, that sort of game. How does that change what the Jaguars should do? Should it change anything at all? And, just kind of how do you think a team prepares for that sort of situation when they haven't had a ton of those games?
Yeah, well, it's tough because it dictates, it's hard to throw downfield when you got those gust winds.
Right, yeah.
And it's hard to catch passes under those conditions. But I still think in order for the Jaguars to win this game, they're going to have to be multi-dimensional. I don't think they can just win this game relying on Blake Bortles rushing.
Right.
I don't think they're going to be able to win this game relying on just Leonard Fournette. Hey, it might be the game where you might have to do a fake punt return or something like that.
It's been a few weeks since they've got one of those out.
You got to do something. I think you got to play some play action, and maybe you throw. But I think you got to. No matter what, I think you got to get your receivers involved. Mm-hmm. And Blake, it's still going to come down to Blake.
Yeah, that's kind of how the quarterback position.
And, just don't throw passes across the middle, and the guys. Throwing passes hard in the cold is not a good thing either because it leads to the flare-ups, the ball flip-ups, and deflections and tip balls. So safe passing, rely on the running game, and the offensive line in a situation like this, they're going to have to come through. They came through in cold weather in Cleveland, but they're not playing Cleveland.
Yeah, a little bit different caliber of team than Cleveland or even Tennessee, who they played in a pretty cold Nashville. But got to remember to bring your coat, though.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's already packed.
There we go. Very cool. All right, well, I think those are the 5 storylines we wanted to talk about. Obviously, like we mentioned before, we'll have coverage in Tuesday's Times-Union. All throughout the week, we'll be talking to your story about, with Marcel Darius, working on a couple of other things, looking back at the 2007 season playoff game between the Jaguars and Steelers and the long David Garrard run that I think a lot of people remember. I know our colleague Rhino Heilman is cooking up a lot of good stuff, as always. That guy is one of the hardest working men in show business. Definitely give him a shout out. He wasn't able to join us today. Anything else you want to tell the fans, readers, before we head out?
Well, just want to say, boy, man, I sure didn't predict that the Jaguars was going to be in the divisional playoffs. Yeah,
I don't think many people did. I think I know, like the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, I hadn't picked a game right. I just couldn't figure this team out. But sometimes that's part of the fun, the joy of sports and covering a professional football team in particular. You never know what the game's going to do. But we'll save our actual predictions for later in the week. You can catch that usually in Sunday's newspaper. As always, we'll have stuff online at Jacksonville.com, and go ahead and go there now. We've got some good stuff. John, thanks again for joining us.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely. Thanks, guys.